Okay, I promised a bunch of viewers I would make this video, and this will be the last one of its kind. I'm going to back up using psychology and science that poor people are more stressed than rich. According to Robert Sapolsky, there are two forms of stresses in the job and class world: executive stress and control stress. Now, executive stress is extremely stressful. People at the top of companies have massive levels of stress and worry. Fringe Elements pointed out that studies show that very rich people have a lot of stress, which is very true. People with an executive position, with all the people in an entire company on their back, the stress is massive. The other form of stress is control stress. This kind of stress is how much control you feel you have over your life and your ability to get out of situations and increase your standard of living. It is also massively stressful, especially if you have learned helplessness. You now have even less chance of getting out of your horrible situation. The only way to measure stress and the amount of damage it's doing objectively and not subjectively is to test the blood for cortisol via CHR, corticotropin-releasing hormones. So scientists have run many experiments and tested CHR levels and discovered many ways people reduce their stress even in very stressful situations. Rats have been used putting them under stressful situations via shocks or bright lights in many scenarios, and humans in similar studies have shown to reflect the same responses. A few undramatic things rats have when lowering their CHR after a stressful situation is exercise and the ability to chew on a block of wood. Hence the nervous habits of chewing on things under stress or hitting a punching bag or shooting a gun. It also may add to our desire to eat more when we're stressed. However, if a rat is forced to exercise, their CHR levels go up instead of down. It has to be their idea and their choice. They have to feel like they're in control of it. Another more dramatic way they can reduce their stress is by taking their stress out on someone else. This drops their own CHR and raises it in the innocent victim they took their aggression out on. In a rhesus monkey pecking order, this happens a lot. Top monkey beats up the next highest monkey, and everyone beats up on the bottom monkey. Top monkey is nervous about knowing his position because it requires a ton of work, and if he got his way to the top by being a dick to everyone, he knows he's made a ton of enemies and will get beaten up a lot if he drops his top spot. Until then, though, he takes all of his stress out on anyone below him, dropping his cortisol levels to a much more healthy level. Bottom monkey is so stressed that his or her reproductive functions are shut off, causing them to be eliminated from the gene pool. In nature and evolution, this is very good. It keeps the species strong. But ever since we developed fire and big brains, where our memes are much more mutatable and are much more powerful than genes, we have given the middle finger to evolution. We see this in humans all the time, where the big boss takes his stress out on a subordinate verbally, and a poor man takes it out on his woman physically. Both have reduced their high levels of stress and made the stress roll downhill. Next, we come to something else that rats can do to reduce their stress: control. If you have a sense that you can control your situation, it drops your CHR as well. If a rat learns that he can reduce the intensity or duration of a shock by pressing a lever, that will make the stress much more bearable, and CHR will be much lower, as if the mind is saying, "I beat it. It didn't get me as bad. I could do something about it." This is yet another reason why people who are poorer turn to religion, because a belief that they can do something, even if there's no evidence for it, like praying, is better than doing nothing, which reduces their CHR levels. Sadly, many become addicted to prayer and don't look for alternative ways to fix their situation, or they have not been taught how to think their way out of bad situations. An alteration of this experiment showed that if the shock duration is 100% random, but they are given a lever that appears to work at least 40% of the time, it's still enough for them to press down like crazy thinking they're doing something. Why many superstitions were developed in human culture, and anecdotal evidence is so powerful at convincing people. This form of overactive pattern recognition does have an evolutionary advantage. It reduces stress when they feel like they're doing something, even when it doesn't work most of the time, because you just never know, it might help. Scam artists take best advantage of people who have a sweet spot where they're stressed, but they have money and options. They can use that desperate pattern seeking that will make them feel like they have control over their situation by buying and using whatever bullshit product someone's selling them. The purpose of having wealth is to increase your options and control over your life. The rich CEO has little control stress by comparison to the bottom poor. He's more stressed than, say, a lower-ranking member who's content in their job and their life, but not nearly as stressed as a person on the bottom with little to no control or power over their stress and lives, much of which is because they never were taught how to learn or think, and they have learned helplessness about life and stress. Giving up some control can also reduce CHR levels if there are other benefits. A person under a manager can have lower CHR levels because they don't have to worry about consequences, while the manager may have control over their people but also have their boss controlling them, so they have to do things like fire someone, which is stressful. So CEOs can have more stress, but they always have more benefits and options than someone at the bottom. They could quit at any time, or take a yoga class, or get a massage, or any numerous things to reduce their stress. They also get the rush off the power, so it makes up for the stress they have. Their future is set, and they're working for a great retirement. The poor person gets the abuse of stress from above and the lack of control stress from being on the bottom, and gets nothing out of being poor and has little future to look forward to other than working till he dies. The assertion that stress causes people not to be good at thinking is also true. The difference is that the rich were not always as stressed, and they worked their way up gradually to deal with more and more stress. Otherwise, they would have never had the ability to become a CEO. The person on the bottom has always been stressed, even in the womb, and doesn't know life any differently. Fringe Elements links 2 studies showing that whites have more anxiety than blacks and Mexicans. These studies are 100% true. However, anxiety does not mean a person has more stress. What anxiety and many forms of depression are is the inability to cope with stress. A psychology class ran a study where 2 groups of students were to visit elderly people in nursing homes. The first group was to visit the elderly at certain specified times, while the second group was to visit their people at random, but with the same frequency. The studies showed that the elderly people who had set times had much lower CHR levels than the people with random times. That feeling of control and certainty was a great stress reducer. However, the really interesting thing occurred after the class was over and the student visit ceased. The CHR levels in the random class was slightly higher, but then went back to pre-visit levels. The CHR levels in the elderly that had defined schedules were through the roof, and many sank into bad depression. Not having stress is very addictive, and it gives you advantages, makes you healthier, and allows your neurons to work faster. It also helps your immune system and makes long-term building investments. However, if you're not presented with stress, you aren't very good at dealing with it. This is the reason why boot camp is made to be so stressful, because you can much better deal with a dangerous stress after having controlled stress without crossing the border of dangerous than just throwing a low-level stress person onto the battlefield. Most of these people there would be worthless. Less blacks and Latinos have anxiety because more of them have dealt with stress all their lives. They may not be at the top of the academic grade, but they won't get anxiety when the littlest bit of stress comes along. Stress also affects people differently at different times in their life. High stress at young ages produces developmental damage. If a child has a lot of stress for a short period of time when they're a child, and then they get out of it to a low stress environment, they tend to recover from it pretty well. Certain types of stress when you're older in life and had a good foundation in cognitive development caused by lower stress in your younger life can be better fixed, especially if you learn cognitive skills to get yourself out of it and don't see stress as a normal thing. If you grew up without that platform and stress is considered normal, why work to change it? Seriously, nothing's going to fix it, and you don't know any different. Now that I've discussed stress, I have a few closing comments about race. Culture has a massive impact on a person's success and how they deal with things. Black Americans had all their culture destroyed and still have a relatively young culture with links back to slavery. A culture will encourage some parts of the brain to grow and others to stay smaller. Like the anti-intellectuals, if you grow up around them, starting from day one, if you're told not to think about that elitist smart people shit, the parts of the brain that are good at that will never be encouraged to grow. They will stay underdeveloped. Even if you're not discouraged and there's nothing encouraging it, it might not grow either. Culture evolves, and reasons for certain cultures link back to very, very old reasons. Sometimes reasons that die away, but the culture still remains. Malcolm Gladwell, in his book Outliers, The Stories of Success, hypothesized, because unfortunately it's not really verifiable, that Asians are better at math because of rice. Rice is the most predictable crop on the planet. It requires more hard work than other crops, but you will get every bit back what you put into it. Most other crops could either do well or do horribly, depending on the year. This predictability drove hard work into their culture. The certainty made them less stressed, so they could take on more stress if need be with less repercussions. Math is 100% predictable as well. Asians brought this culture with them to the States, so even while they were being horribly discriminated, they kept working hard. The idea of not getting what you work for was difficult for them. They believed there was always going to be a reward at the end. In slave culture, no matter how much you work, you still probably won't get any reward. In discrimination days, same thing. Certain American black cultures might still have the same mindset of learned helplessness of no matter how hard I work, I still won't get anything from it, so why bother? Those who do well now either have people who want to leech on their success or who discriminate against them because they aren't one of them anymore. It will require cultural changes for many of these people to change. And now the twin study. He said that since fraternal twins have lower IQ correlation than identical twins, epigenetics does not play into it. Fraternal twins are not identical. There is variation in genetics within species. The reason we use identical twins in these studies is because they are genetically identical. Genes do have an effect on IQ. Genetic variation exists in all people and races. A fraternal twin got a different combo of the parent's DNA than the other siblings did, so the IQ will probably be different. What causes IQs in terms of genetics is massive though, from issues of stress control, better neuron connection, and who else knows what yet. The children have the same womb and the same nutrient conditions, so of course they're going to have a higher IQ correlation than regular siblings. Each sibling was in the womb at different points in the mother's life. The mother underwent different levels of stress and had a different diet and so on. The gene expression of each child is going to be completely different. Genes have an effect, but stress in the womb will not allow these high IQ genes to reach their potential. Some people in any population are going to have worse genes for IQ than others. It's going to happen, but an entire race of people having a lower IQ based solely on genes has no evidence. Epigenetics, nurture, bias, and culture account for much more of the effect than genes do. And lastly, if American blacks truly are genetically inferior to us because of their genes, then Southern slave owners must have also been genetically inferior. With the advent of genetic testing available to the public, more and more blacks have wanted to know their tribal heritage. What tends to be emotionally shocking to them is when they find out the percentage of European DNA they have in them. Some blacks, who you would have never guessed, have been found to have up to 80% European in them, which can cause an identity crisis when they look, act, and identify black, but they realize they're mostly white. Which brings the point that race is not a word in genetics and anthropology. It's a word used to separate people. Back in the day, the German and Irish races were considered inferior to the wonderful English race back in the day. Haplogroups and ethnicity are what's used now. Ethnicity is based purely on culture. Haplogroups use mitochondria and Y chromosomes to map, and you will find haplogroups all over the places in areas and peoples you never expected. That's the thing, we're all mutts, especially in America. Many blacks have white in them, and many whites have black in them. Migration and cross-cultural breeding reduces differentiation drastically. Skin color doesn't indicate what's in your brain at all. Your nutrient and stress levels, your rearing and culture will have a much bigger impact on your life than what race you belong to. I hope some of this was helpful and interesting. This is the last video of this type. I will return to my regularly scheduled program. Thank you.